Awesome. Okay. Spain, Panama. Oh my God. Nashville. Okay. Well, I'm calling in from Boston. And yeah, nice to meet you all. Thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. And hopefully this is helpful. My name is Alice, and or Coach Alice, or Alice. And this is really supposed to be an AMA. So more of an Ask Me Anything session than like a workshop than me presenting or walking you through anything. So I have a couple of just beginner slides, just kind of intro slides. And then, I think it'd be great if we could just kick it off with some questions, and I'll answer them live to the best of my ability. So we did this part where you're dialing in front. I'm curious, is this chat mostly people who are round 1 or round 2 or just undecided, still thinking about the MBA? Round 2, okay. I was also round 2. Okay. Round 2. Okay. Okay. Round 1, but maybe round 2. Okay. I think I was in that same spot around this time last year, and then quickly realized that I was just not ready, unfortunately. But okay, cool. So just a few logistics. If you want to ask a question, feel free to put it in the chat or just go off mute and ask away if somebody else is not talking. I want to say I'm not an MBA admissions expert. I am a Leland coach, and a lot of the coaching that I do comes from personal experiences with coaching and also having just gone through the process. And I'm really just trying to pay that forward. There's so many people who are so helpful. It's such a long and arduous process, and just trying to give back in that sense. In terms of the lens, these are things that, were in my control. These are tips from those coaches that I spoke to and things that are really on the internet. I'd say I have a few tips and tricks of my own, but a lot of kind of what you'll hear from me are things that you have probably already heard, or if you haven't, somebody else will also probably say it. Feedback, reviews, all welcome. And also for attending the event, there is a 15% discount. That is the code. And I've also included my my QR code as well. Okay, so a little bit about me. This is just a compilation of my educational and work experience background. I'm heading to Stanford in the fall, and I'm heading as a consortium fellow. If you're interested in consortium, happy to talk about that as well. I'm also a management leadership for tomorrow fellow, or MLT for short. And that's for underrepresented minorities who are looking to kind of pursue an MBA. It's the most excellent program ever. And so if you want to talk about that, I can talk to you about that as well. I'm also a new VC fellow at Necessary Ventures. We invest in necessary things and focus on early stage startups. So that's a path that I'm currently exploring. And before that, I was in private equity, mostly focused in real estate, and also did a year of investment management and credit at Eaton Vance. And before that, I went to Williams College. I majored in psychology. Yes, you can get to finance from psychology, and yes, you can get to business school from psychology. So also can answer questions about that. Yeah, so I'll stop there. And yeah, let's just dive. What are your questions, guys? What do you want to know? What can I help with? Who's the brave soul?
Hello.
Hi.
I can go first. How did you do the sections on work experience and differentiate them from the resume? What did you focus on those like kind of different types of questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. Are you speaking to a specific school or application form?
I've seen it on a few, so not necessarily specific, but in general.
Yeah.
How did you think of that?
Yeah, so I asked for the school because I know the word count is different for some of the schools. So I think for some of the, like for Wharton, I had like half a paragraph, like a paragraph for each of those. But then I think for some of the other schools, it was like 50 words instead of like 200 or whatever it was. So what I tried to focus on, I think of the MBA resume as impact oriented, right? So it's results driven. It's, showing key technical skills, key soft skills like collaboration and communication, and really is more focused on like, this is what I did at work. Here are the specific projects that I worked on, and here's how I had an impact in those organizations from a work perspective. And then you also have your extracurricular activities, which are super important and should actually take up a decent chunk of your MBA resume. But then when it came to the application form, I tried to focus on other areas where I had excelled in leadership that wasn't necessarily on my resume. So if I was involved in an affinity group and like ran an affinity group event or something like that, then I talked about that. Or if I was actively driving new initiatives, like during COVID, for example, at one of my companies, I started doing this like weekly, like this poker night that we would have, right? And so I included things that were more about, here's how I interact in the community of work, and here are the leadership abilities that I've had outside of like, I increased profits by 15%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. I guess just follow up. Is it okay to not focus on like I drew profit since you already included in your resume?
I would, to the extent that you have like the wording space, I would phrase it as I did this, right? Like a quick summary. I did this. And in addition to that, here's also where I showed up at work. So that's the kind of framing that remind them, right? Like, hey, like I was like valuable to the team. I increased value, but also like, here are some other ways that I was able to contribute to the team.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. We have a question from FC. I like can't see the names because hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Alice. So my question is around maximizing the chances of getting a fellowship by being very strategic in what you write in your essays. Like we all would love to get fellowships, right? But there's only so limited amount of funding. So yeah, what should we write about, and how can we better plan our essays?
It's such a hard question because I found, especially this year, that the scholarship it was just such a black box, like how scholarships ended up. So if you look at Wharton, for example, it's like, I think the stat is only 30% of applicants or candidates are offered scholarship, like funding, right? So it's like, and I think there's definitely especially if it's an academic scholarship, there's a big component of it is they're your test scores. Like at the end of the day, they're your test scores, especially for I think if they're like maybe not named scholarships as much, that might be more like leadership and service. Like I know Columbia has a few named scholarships that are focused on like excellence and like leadership and community. And there are also some schools that offer diversity fellowships as well. I'd say it's like I would say make sure your test scores are good, right? But I think a lot of schools that's like the first barrier. But if there are specific scholarships at the school that you're aware of that you want to be considered for, then I would write to those. Like Columbia, for example, has a few different scholarships that you can kind of like, I guess, maybe position yourself for, but you can't apply to any individual fellowship. And there are so many other things that you need to be playing to, like the actual questions themselves, that I think it's a hard thing to gain, if that makes sense. But like schools that are need-based, like that's a lot. Like, you know what you're gonna, well, you don't know what you're gonna get, but like that, there's a more clear-cut line. But when it comes to like academic scholarships, I think this past year it was very surprising kind of how things shook up. So, I wish I knew how to game it. And yeah, like, and to be completely open, I didn't get any money from Wharton. I didn't get any money from MIT. Yeah, those were the two schools I didn't get any funding from. Those were my only two academic schools, I think. Academic, like merit scholarship schools, maybe. So you just, but then I got 140,000 from Tuck. So you just really don't know how it's going to shake up.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. What are the best resources you use to pivot from a non-finance background into heavy finance? The number one resource was definitely the people around me. That's for sure. But I'd say way back, like definitely Wall Street Prep. Because I was focused on real estate, I did this course called REFAI. So a lot of like self-study Excel boot camps, like modeling boot camps. So that's kind of how I gained my most of my technical skills. And a lot of the finance roles really are like on the job. And so I feel if you're in the interview process or anything like that, like it's really about demonstrating that you can like learn the job on the desk. But those were some of the resources that I used. I'm curious, Alice S., are you trying to pivot into finance post B school or? And if you can't talk right now, then we can chat offline. But yes, okay, got it. Post B school, I'd say in business school, especially with pre-recruiting and just recruiting in general, there are going to be so many resources that they're going to give you like free access to and stuff. One of them is still Wall Street Prep, and I think those are super helpful for kind of prepping. Okay. Yeah, Gurman?
Hi, yeah.
Hi.
I was wondering, like, when did you know that you were ready to like apply for your MBA programs?
It's so I like had gone back and forth for a while. But I knew I wanted to go to business school at some point in my life. And then so the way my job worked, or a lot of PE shops work, is a lot of it is like you're in it for 2 years, and then the third year it's like maybe you get called back, maybe you don't. And by that point I was going on 4 years in real estate private equity only. And I knew that I wasn't, in love with it, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so it was like if I didn't pivot at that time, it would have been very hard for me to pivot without business. Like it would have just been very difficult. So it was kind of like a hard, like, okay, I need to like get out of this industry. But I also think like earlier on, I knew that just having a more well-rounded understanding of business and being able to grow my network was going to be something that I wanted to do. It was either med school or business school, and I dropped out of Orgo. So there's that too. But does that make sense? Or what exactly are you like? Are you still deciding what is holding you back?
Oh, I actually just graduated, and I'm also entering like a 2-year program where like it's like investment management, but I'll be a data scientist.
Oh, cool.
So I was like hoping to maybe potentially use a business school as like a way to not only just be a data scientist.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you'd be applying would you be applying in deferred programs? No.
I think it's too late for me to apply to deferred
Yeah, okay,
programs,
that's what I thought. Okay. You just mean in 2 years
Yeah.
you might consider applying. Got it.
Yeah, I was thinking about applying like next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Can you talk about your activities section and what you did? Yeah. So, well, I think my activities section from like undergrad was probably way more robust than post undergrad. I was super involved in undergrad in kind of a couple different affinity groups, like Students of Caribbean Ancestry and Black Student Union. I was also really involved in the first generation initiatives on campus. I was president of like 9 a cappella groups. So I had a mix of things that I did in undergrad. And then post undergrad, while living in Boston, I had started this running club. And then I, last year, really joined these 2 boards. One was for Synergist. It's a women in private equity network. And then the other one is a nonprofit. It's called Stepping Stone, but it's a nonprofit that aims to increase education access to students in underserved communities. And so those are probably those are probably the heaviest things on my application. And I did like other things. I'd say like at work, I was part of affinity groups. I tried to lead social chair, like I was always like a social chair or something for different organizations. I was pretty involved in MLT. Yeah, so those were kind of I'd say it spanned, there are no sports. I guess, no, there was a running club, but it spanned the variety of like things that I was really passionate about. Really, they were all things that I was just really passionate about. Yeah, those are my activities. Alice, let me know if that gets at your question, or if there's, how did I join the nonprofit boards? It really was, I was involved with the nonprofit like a few years going back, and they just have a board for young professionals. And I like was hounding her for a year, like waiting to apply. So that was just, there was just an opportunity there. And then the Synergist one also was, a friend of mine was on the board. She was talking to me about it, and the application just happened to still be open, and I just applied that same day. So I'd say like I would maybe look up nonprofit boards in your area or young professionals boards in your area and try and see if that's a good place to start. Okay. How did you manage the recommendation letters? Yeah, I did a whole workshop on this. In my case, I haven't told my direct manager that I will apply to an MBA, but I also just recently started to report to him. So I feel some past managers or a mentor might be better. How did you approach them without coaching them and what to write? That's good. So many good questions there. One, totally fine if they're not from your employer. I didn't use anyone from my company. I actually think it's better not to use people from your company, because if you don't have a great relationship there and then you don't get into business school, then they already know that you were applying to, like, it could just create so much drama. But I have a lot of friends who did use their current employers because everybody else was also applying to business school. So if that's the case, then okay. But also I didn't feel like I had a relationship with my recommenders to be able to like have them write a thorough letter. So everyone that wrote for me were managers of mine from years prior, and one of them was from 5 years ago, and she was only my manager for 1 year, but we stayed really close and we had a really great personal relationship. And how did I coach without coaching them? I wish I could pull up but I have a whole recommendation packet that I might try and pull up. Maybe it'll be helpful. It's I like basically just fed them. I didn't feed them anything, but I gave them everything that they needed to have in order to write the best letter that they could. So that's everything from my motivations, from, sorry, I know you guys can see okay. So it was my motivations, my goals. This document was like 40 pages, and I don't know if they read all of it, but it was like, and then I also would I sent them like, this is the project that I did. Here are the list of projects that I did when I worked under you, and here are the ways that I think that I really had an impact, right? And like, like I gave them key, like, and I also was responding to the questions themselves. Like the questions are something like, why would this person succeed in like a, you know, whether this person's strengths, their principal strengths. So I literally would write bullets that were like, my principal strengths are like, and I think that was helpful for them. And I don't feel like I didn't like write it for them, but I definitely had them, I was portraying myself in the light that I wanted them to see. So I gave them everything they needed so that they couldn't be like, oh, well, I didn't know this about you. Or like, I like did feed it to them more or less, but I knew they believed it. So it was totally fine. I think it's fine to like, okay, at the end of the day, this is the only outside piece of feedback the admissions office will get, right? Like it is the only outside perspective. It is such an important piece of your application. And the last thing you want to do is leave things up to chance. Like, and the things that are in your power is like giving them a document like this. This is totally in your power. And the fact that you even like did this and give it to them, it's like, wow, okay, like Alice really cares about this. Look at the time that she put into this, and it makes them put more time into it. So that's kind of how I got through it. So to answer your question, approach them by giving them a recommender packet, and also totally fine to not use your current recommenders. Just use the people who know you best and make sure that they just follow, like they're under the guidelines of like former supervisor, so on and so forth. I'm going to take a break from the chat. I know SM, you have your two SMs. Sarah M.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello.
Hi. Earlier you said at this point, I was the one who was like, hey, I'm hoping for round one to be ready, but maybe round two, and you said you felt the same way last year. Can you kind of elaborate on that? And then what was your like ultimate decision to wait to round two?
Yeah. So it's August. It was probably like the last couple of weeks of July. I was still like, oh, like maybe I could like turn it around and apply to Stanford round one. And for me, part of it was that I wanted to apply to Knight Hennessy. And in order to apply to Knight Hennessy, you have to be round one. And I think at the time, I just felt like a stigma. I was like, oh, people like, I don't know, so silly, because there's no difference between round one and round two, truthfully. And I just felt like, oh my God, like all my friends who are in private equity are applying round one, like I should be applying round one too. And I think it just took talking to people and admissions officers. I literally spoke to admissions officers about it. And I realized like, okay, like in order to get Knight Hennessy, I need to have a great application. And I just wasn't at any point, like what I was going to write about in July or August was not what I ended up writing about in December. Like it just wasn't, like I wasn't ready. Like my essays weren't ready. Like my story wasn't ready. And I was still testing. My last test was January 1st, 2024. I applied January 5th, 2024. So I was just a little delulu, but yeah, that's where I was around this time last year.
Okay. Oh, I feel the same way. I feel like there's this weird pressure to be like, get in round one because, you know, maybe there's more fellowship money. I don't know. Maybe not.
Okay. That one's a tough one because that, like, I don't have the data to support that, but I think that one may not be 100% bullshit. Like, I think there may be some percentage of it that is actually true, but don't quote me on it. And I don't know. I know people who got money in round one and round two, but like, if you looked at Columbia, for example, like they were giving out a bunch of money last year in round one, and then geopolitical issues, people pull money out of Columbia. People don't get money round two at Columbia. So there might be some truth to that, but I wouldn't let it drive because in order to get money, you need to get in, and in order to get in, you need to have a strong application.
Yeah, that's true. I see that you, sorry to steal another question, but I saw that you applied to multiple schools. What was like your ultimate criteria for picking a school? Like why'd you pick Stanford over everything else?
Yeah. I had written down, like I had written Stanford in a notebook like years and years ago, like Stanford, and that was for a PhD. This is back in college. Like I wanted to go to Stanford for a PhD. And I think some of the reasons that, I wanted to go for an MBA are still the same. But I applied to Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, Tuck, and MIT. I didn't get into Harvard. And it came down to Tuck and Stanford for me. And I'll just give a quick aside, like my boyfriend's going to Wharton, and and it still came down to Stanford and Tuck. And the reasons behind that were, first and foremost, the people that I was interacting with from all of the schools. I think the people from Stanford and the people from Tuck really stuck out to me the most as being like incredibly kind and incredibly themselves. And that's first and foremost where I wanted to be, right? Like I didn't, like if I didn't go to business school, like anyone who goes to business school, it's not like their life would have ended if they didn't go to business school, right? And so I wanted it to be like 2 years where I felt like I could really explore and, finally get to choose a path for myself in an environment where I wasn't worried about the guy next to me stabbing me in the back or like competing. Like I didn't want to do any of that at all. And I'd say the opportunities at Stanford, like Stanford has a race and mental health lab. I want to go into mental health eventually. So that's really important to me. I think just the culture around conversations is also really important to me, being vulnerable and being, just a kind of leader that is empathetic and just more holistic, I think is really important to me. And Stanford's curriculum on they have a different leadership curriculum. It's very touchy-feely, as you will hear. And that's what I wanted. Ultimately, I wanted to I just had come out of an industry that was like very not soft, very, very hard, very not touchy-feely. And I needed to kind of just get back to what was at the core of like who I am. And I felt like I'm most aligned with Tuck and Stanford. I have a page on why Stanford here, I think, for me, and kind of some of the same things that I had mentioned, but it was definitely like, yeah, I could have gotten a full ride everywhere else and no money at Stanford, and I still would have gone to Stanford.
Wow, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that. It's also very inspiring. I can relate a lot to being in a very hard environment currently and maybe wanting something very different, especially if I'm going to be funding it, and it's also beautiful there, but yeah.
It really is. I visited in November before applications were in, and I was like, why did we come here? This was the worst decision ever. Like, it's going to hurt so bad to like I didn't want to know how good it was. But no, you should definitely visit because it gives you just a different perspective, honestly. But okay, I'm going to go back here. Manal. Why? I think I answered that. When it comes to the MBA, with focus on entrepreneurship, how much do you think Stanford cares about having top corporate startup logos and or positions in our professional experience? Manel, if you could come off mute, and I don't know if I fully understand your last question, but I'm going to tackle another one until you come off mute. I had a couple questions regarding different topics. Mohammed, you didn't. Oh, there they are. Okay. When it comes to testing, how did you navigate prep for that? Do you think if someone is not particularly good with this, they can make up for it with other parts of the app particular? Yes, I do think that, because that was me. I am that person. I had like a fine test score. Like that wasn't the thing that got me in 100%. I don't know what got me in, but it wasn't my GRE. And I think you'll be, I honestly think once you've met a threshold, like they'll give you a look, and like what they're then looking for is like something so much more than your score. And I would just focus on that. I think you can also make it up if you have a strong GPA from undergrad. That's helpful. If you are still worried about both of those things, maybe if there's a course that you can take and just knock it out of the park, then you can include that. And also generally, I'd say business school is, it's about like one of the biggest things about business school is how you, yes, they want to make sure that you're employable, but also it's how you show up as a leader and in your community. And if there are ways that you have done that have been absolutely remarkable, like they don't have to be remarkable in and of itself. It's just like the way that you've done it has been remarkable. Then yes, like that's a big part of your story. And that says so much more than your test score could ever say. So yes. And your second question, given essays take a lot of time, how much time for someone who is applying for round 2 and is preparing for the test in parallel is enough? When did you start your essays, assuming one is applying to? Yeah, so I had started like thinking about my essays because I was in this prep program. Like you were kind of just always thinking about essays and accumulating things. So I was like accumulating different things and bouncing different types of ideas that I could have for like months. Like definitely started like since like April, May, June at least is probably when I started drafting like brand points and stuff like that. Actually drafting essays, I'd say closer to like September, October timeframe. And I was still testing during then. And to the extent that you don't have, like, to the extent that you can not do both at the same time, I really would recommend that you try and get the test out of the way before you write, honestly. Like, you still have time to just focus on the test right now. Because because every time I would take a break from the test to write, it would take me so long to get back to the test, and I have to restudy. Like, it was a lot. I wish that I had gotten it out of the way, like by the end of summer last year, and then just like turned to essays. But it is doable. You can do it at the same time. I don't know if I answered that question fully. If you still want to dive into that, I'm happy to. Let me know, Mohammed. Okay, let me go back up here. Neha, quick question about essays. Can we frame our purpose for getting an MBA around general leadership growth instead of around specifics like starting a startup? Of course. Yeah, definitely. No. I think that's really common too for people who are staying in the same industry. I think there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, like I'm in PE now and I want to go back to PE, but like, I don't know, I want to like be a manager. I don't know. I just want to learn how to lead better. So I think that's 100%. Like it's very common. So yes, I think you can frame it around that. I would just say like, that I would say to add, I would add on other things that you can get out too. And I think when you're talking about leadership and growth with each school, like all of these schools are going to focus on leadership in some way. I would just be cognizant of, why is the Stanford leadership style different from like the MIT leadership style, like, and making sure that you appeal to that in your essays for that school. Oura, why? Can a peer recommend you? So no, not for the like business school applications. They need to have been on like in a supervisory role. But like if they were like, yeah, they need to have been like in a supervisory role. But if you're applying through consortium, you can have a peer recommend you. Like for the consortium, they have their their separate recommendation person, so you can have a peer recommend you for that. I wrote something about my goals post MBA. Okay, I can take a look. I'll take a look at that after, since it's very specific, and just open it up to any other questions any other general questions that could be helpful for the whole group that people have.
I think this got lost above, so I can say it out loud. But when you talked about your contributions to a program, like in some essays, were you bringing up more intrinsic characteristics like, oh, I'm a curious person, or I'm a leader, or more like intrinsic characteristics or professional experiences. Like I can bring my knowledge from my private equity background into the classroom, or is it a little bit of both?
Oh, you have to. It's definitely a little bit of both. Sorry, which questions would you be answering with? Did you? I didn't hear the first part of your question, but I heard everything else.
It's like essays. Some essays are like, what would your contributions to the program
contribution
be?
essays. Yes. Okay, so the contribution essays, they actually should be like. Are you talking about Wharton?
No, but Kellogg has changed their essays, and one of them is pretty similar. Like, why Kellogg, and what are you bringing into the program?
Yeah, so I think it is a little bit of both, but definitely heavier on the professional, like impact, like hard stuff side. Because the question is really asking, like, especially in programs where the learning is from your other classmates, right? It's like part of the question is, okay, like what are you bringing to the conversation, and like what expertise do you have that you're bringing to the conversation in the classroom, but then also like what are you passionate about and might bring to the entire campus. So like maybe it's like, you know, a more of a appreciation for mental health or wellness, or maybe that's one of the things. Or maybe you notice that like Kellogg doesn't have a biking club, and like you have always been super interested in biking and you've been doing it forever and you did it with your dad. And so you want to bring it to the, you know, like because it has all of these benefits on business. So it's a combination of like, here are all the great things that, you know, I've done and I can bring to this school, but also like, here are some of the things that I'm passionate about and want to share with my classmates, and like have that add to the general ethos of the school. Does that make sense, Isabel?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another one from Alice. What do you think are the key things that make a successful MBA essay? Ooh, that is so I feel like all the essays are so different. Like MIT essays are so different from like, you know, from Tuck's essay. For all of them are so different. I'd say the number one most important thing is making sure you understand what they're asking you and answering the question. So that's definitely first and foremost. And the second, I'd say at every point in your essays, so the next two things are, at every point, you should be able to answer the question of why, right? Like it's like you go 3-5 levels deep on why, and everything in your essay. So I would do this line by line and be like, okay, is this line important? What is it telling them? Is it telling them what I want them to hear, like to know about me? Like, is it in line with the rest of my brand points in my application, right? So it's, and why do I care about this? Have I explained that? Why should somebody else care about this? Why should they pick me over somebody else, right? And so this, making sure that you're answering this question of like, why? Because the last thing that you want to do is leave anything on the table for admissions to, you know, guess and, you know, want more of like, I wish this person had just told me. You want to kind of put everything out there. And then the third thing I would say, I guess I would just say on the brand points, just make sure that you're writing about, you know, make sure that what you're writing about is coherent with the rest of the application that you're putting together, that you're putting forth. So, yeah, I'd say those are probably my top. And just make sure they're like just true to who you are. I feel like for a long time, I was in between two essay topics for a lot of my essays. And one of them was like, okay, this is the story that I think everyone will like want to hear, right? Like, oh, you know, like I want to stay in PE and like I want to be like a leader in PE. Like this makes the most sense. And the real story was I want to get out of P and I want to go into like a mental health startup, and I'm coming from real estate private equity because that felt like a harder pill to swallow. And I'm like, so it took me a long time to pick the true story, but at the end of the day, I think that's also just incredibly important. Yeah. Thanks. a lot of words there. Oh, who is this now? Oh, Sarah. Is your hand still up, Sarah? Or
Yeah.
do you have another question?
No, I just put it up again. How important do you think like networking with other folks that are like alumni from the school? I know you said to go to visit the schools if you can, but like networking in conjunction with your whole application. Obviously, you already have the network from the business or company or area of work that you're in, but like breaking into the space that you're trying to get to while also taking on all the applications.
It's not even like you don't have to be networking. Networking is so important. That's the first thing I'll say. You don't have to be networking with like the president of the consulting club at, X business school because you want to go into consulting. It's more so, I think, a lot of the value out of talking to current students specifically too, of the clubs that you maybe like start by like the clubs you want to join or anything like that. It doesn't have to be like industry specific, but talking to people who are currently there will give you ideas or things that classes or things that they did or people they talked to that aren't easily found on the website, and being able to incorporate that in your application in a way where it's not just like I spoke to 50 people, like take me, in a way like being able to incorporate it in a way is like, okay, I did my homework, I really want to be here and I really understand what it's like, being a consulting focused MBA student at your school. Like I understand what it's like to like do all of these things. And so I think I did talk to a lot of different people industry wise. And I think that was mostly because I was just trying to figure out like what I wanted to write about for my short and long-term goal and what actually I wanted to do. And so that was most of my career conversations were about like, okay, so like you're at a startup, like what do you like it? Like, and for more so for personal than like for the application itself. Does that make sense? But definitely talk to current students. And also a lot of these clubs will have buddy programs where they match you with a current student, and that current student will look at your whole application, which is super valuable because they're on the inside. They know more or less like what the school's looking for. And so I would recommend hunting those down.
Yeah, no, that is super helpful. I appreciate that. I definitely need to do more networking out, like, and looking into all the different schools. I think I'm in that let's get the test out of the way mindset right now. Yeah. So I'm sure everybody can relate.
The other thing that is great, some schools will have different like diversity events. So they'll have like a women's weekend, like Tuck had a whole weekend, women's weekend. And different schools will have different kinds of events like for the day or for the weekend. And those are great ways to kind of go be on campus, meet admissions, and meet other people who are applying too, or current students, and kind of build those relationships live.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure. Isabel says, what types of questions did you find helpful in those networking conversations, which brought up interesting things you would have not learned otherwise? Yeah. So, so the career conversations were more discovery. They were more like career discovery conversations. And so like I had started out thinking that I wanted to like have a startup in like the health and beauty space. And so like talking to people made me better understand what that industry looked like and whether I actually wanted to do it. In terms of like networking with like with admissions officers, the kinds of questions I asked then were like, okay, so like, what do you look for when you read an essay? Like, or when you walk me through your application process. So once the application hits your desk, like what happens after that? Or what are some of the pitfalls that you see throughout the application? Other questions like, how should we be thinking about this essay? So those networking questions were more like, you know, AO specific and like application specific. And then I think I had another bucket of networking where I was really trying to build relationships with current students at the clubs. Like, even though a lot of the conversations were around like, you know, like, like I spoke to this MBA a lot, and I spoke to this other girl who's doing like an MBA and PH, and they were probably two of the most helpful people throughout the entire application process, and they like read essays and stuff. And so I think those are some of the things that I would discover that I kind of wouldn't have learned otherwise, just like the mechanics of like how the actual class, like a class might work, or like how certain clubs work, or things like, oh, there's an academic adjustment period. Like, I think things that you just like it's so inundating like online and stuff. And or for example, I spoke to an admissions officer who like told me about this founder who had just founded something at the school in the field that I wanted to, but with a different lens. And they were like, read the article, like, I then actually ended up like, just by circumstance, I talked about the entire thing for like a few sentences in my essay. And I actually think it made for a stronger argument on my why this school, like, and so those are kind of some of the things that I think it can be really good to point you in the right direction through the networking. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, what if our background is pretty diverse? Is it a problem to not have a resume twin? I don't know what that means. I don't know. Gosh, if you want to go off mute, if you're still here, but I think I would like to think that most people, like, that nobody else's resume looked like mine. I hope. I don't know. No, I'm gonna say no. It's not a problem to not have a resume twin. I'm sure you'll stand out. Like, I don't know. Oh, you're at the gym? What day is it? Okay, yeah. I mean, we have like 10 minutes together. If you want to go off mute and ask any questions, feel free. Never mind. We have like 2 minutes. So yeah, if there are any other questions, just let me know. And I'll put up my code again, just in case people are interested in booking some time. And there's a discount as well. Wait, we started at, what time did we start? 7:30. We started at 7:30. Erica. Oh, it was only 45 minutes? It was scheduled for... I thought it was scheduled for an hour. Oh my God. Okay, let me just answer these really quick, and then what should we avoid? A learning you might have. What should we... my background is in finance, and I should just my own startup in tech. I think it's a bit of a jump. Sorry, icon will be turned off, but they won't be turned off. Just explain your thinking behind it, and it shows that you can do anything. Just lean into that. It's totally fine. I'm sure they've admitted people who have done finance and transitioned into like tech startups. Like, these schools are getting international applications from everywhere. Thank you, Alice. This has been so helpful. Okay, yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Feel free to book some time to chat. Have a great evening. And yeah, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye.